over. We only, but it's almost. I think we've got a couple more days to get those census forms filled out. So I always want to keep you mindful of that. And then again, I want to thank AARP for sponsoring this edition of Win TV, and not only sponsoring this edition of Win TV, but also sponsoring our recent voter's guide. It's really a informational historical piece that's in this week's edition of the Washington Informer. But like I said, you can get it online. And this was made possible by our special editions editor, Dr. Shantella Sherman. Dr. Sherman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me as always.
So tell me, what can people look for in this issue?
Oh, we pulled the rabbit out of the hat with this one. So I'm extremely grateful that James Wright did an exceptional piece on home rule because a lot of people who've moved to the district don't understand the history of DC and voting rights. And so all of that's broken down pretty meticulously, including some information from Dr. Calvin Rolock, your dad, and the founder of the Washington Informer, who was a staunch advocate of both home rule and statehood for DC. In addition to that, there are checklists that are there so that you can go through and ensure that you have everything that you need in order to vote. And then there are a couple of historical narratives that I personally place in to just try and encourage people to go out and vote because I was rather alarmed that only 126 million registered voters came out to vote in the 2016 election. And that's roughly 55% of those who were eligible to vote. And so we have to understand just how important voting is. And so we kind of go through that in jury duty, speaking about what is indicative and necessary as a citizen of this country, that you do your duty. And part of that is jury duty and voting.
When you, besides the numbers, when you did this, did you discover anything else new? I mean, I know that we go down these paths, and we're like, wow, even though we think we know where we're headed. Was there anything that surprised you as you put this issue together?
I think what probably pulled on me the most was the fact that college campuses and schools are usually the places where voting takes place most, and whether it's the canvassing process or the actual pulling the lever. And so with COVID this year, what we're starting to find out is that a lot of things that we took for granted, we can't take for granted this year. And so it was indicative. I'm glad it was an imperative that we pulled together some type of guide to help people know you have to go back and check your status. You have to determine if you're not necessarily your district, but the place where you would vote, your polling centers are still open or if they've moved. And then what procedures and protocol are in place for those who are concerned about COVID. And so how will this, how will we do it this year? They may be slightly different. So it was interesting to see the different areas and different regions are doing different things, and then how that will actually impact the voting numbers as we get into the election.
Um, one of the things that you do in every special issue, which I think all of us appreciate, is sort of a reading list of books. You did that again this time. And what can you tell us or share with us what some of those books were?
Well, again, I thought it was important to have some type of historical texts that were there so that you understand what the importance of history is, the importance in history of voting. So we always assume that everyone who comes to this country can vote, but this was a tiered process. And so we say, okay, all white men were able to vote coming in. That's not true. So you need to be able to understand. And so there are a couple of historical texts there, but also Michael Fauntroy's book. He's a Howard University political scientist. And I wanted to, again, ensure that those who wanted additional information specifically about home rule in DC, as we're still trying to fight for statehood, understood just what that process has been since the inception of this area.
Interesting. I was talking to Miss Williams earlier about the nightmare that I had waking up. And it wasn't even an election, but I woke up thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't vote. Because I did vote in the first election after home rule in the district. And it was the first election since this one that I would have submitted an absentee ballot because I was a student at Hampton at the time. And I had to, not only because of the history of voting as it relates to Black folks in this country, but because, as you said, my family was so actively involved in the home rule struggle that I couldn't sit back and say it's not important.
Absolutely.
So I really appreciate what you've done again. You've done again and again, but you've done it. You did it again this time. And to be honest, you all always create the covers. I don't, but I like the fact that you had a young Black male, on the cover with the what do you call it? The mask.
His mask,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, with his mask. And so that says a whole lot, because we try to say things. But why did you decide to use that as a cover?
Well, actually, I would love to take the credit for it, but that was Zebra Design. That was Dan and Jaron, our great graphic designers who came up with that. But again, the stay safe and vote. So I think Ron Burke, who handles the advertising, just really, really stressed that no matter what, it was important that we get out and vote. And so if COVID was the issue, then we needed to make sure we handled that with the cover. Cover up your face, but go vote.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I know that next week we're going to be looking at financial literacy, another issue that impacts our community because, I mean, we've got to vote, but also we've got to make sure that we know how to manage our pocketbooks and to continue to bring resources into our communities, particularly during this time of COVID. So looking forward to see what you have in store for us.
Absolutely. Look forward to being back here again this time next week.
All righty. Thanks a lot,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Sherman. All right.